What's going on, you guys? First episode of Viking Builds here, and we are on our way to pick up a 2014 Dodge Charger. Saw it on Facebook Marketplace for a 1970 Charger body swap. Here it is right here when I saw it on Facebook Marketplace. A window sticker indicates it's got a salvage title, which it did. Ran and drove beautifully. Here I am taking it for a test drive. I just need to put some air in the tire. It definitely needs an alignment. It's got some codes on the dash, but other than that, it is good to go. Plugged up one of the tires so we could take a longer drive, put it on the trailer, and we are headed home to New York State. No issues on the way home. Pretty excited to get the build started. So as soon as we get it home, I'm going to unload it off my trailer, which you see here, and we'll immediately get into tearing it down. Started by taking off the fenders, which was not too bad, being that they were pretty much already off already. Also was able to get the hood off pretty soon. Here you see me going through the front end and showing some of the sensors, which I did go through and label as I was pulling them off. This is an airbag sensor. By throwing labels on them, I would ensure that once I put the new body on, I'll be able to reconnect a lot of the things like the radar unit for the cruise control, which I want to maintain, as well as these horns here, because I want to be able to use all the buttons from the inside of the car, as I'm going to retain the entire driving platform, the dash, the wheels, and everything. Here's a before and after of the fenders coming off. You can probably see the old Charger in the background there. So this is my shop in the background as well. It's a single bay. So that's where I'm going to be doing all the work here. I'm showing where I'm taking the doors off. Actually, it was kind of a pain, but once I was able to get the fenders off, the doors are real easy because I could not get to those bolts that we were pointing out. Again, I have pretty minimal mechanical knowledge, so this is quite an undertaking for me. These clips, no matter how long I work on cars, are always a problem. Here I am getting inside of the car. One thing that I want to do is test and make sure that it runs and drives the entire time, because at no point is this going to be a non-driving unit. That is my goal. I've learned that the best project car to have is one that you can run and drive always. So by starting it periodically every time, another thing I'm going to do is ensure that I'm not cutting any wires or taking anything off that's going to set off the SCIM system, which is a security key interface module, anti-theft devices, what have you. So I've gone ahead and made sure that I turned off all the dome lights and all the surround lights to ensure that the battery is not going to drain. Although I do disconnect it as I go through. The purpose of that is if I do cut anything by accident, it won't short anything, which I do down the road, and you guys will see. Luckily, because I had the battery disconnected, nothing got shorted. So taking the doors off is really going to be my biggest concern, because I was thinking that the SCIM system, which I've heard nightmares about from things like DIY Hemi, can be quite catastrophic because Dodge is not very good about releasing codes and processors for their PCM, ECM, so it's very hard to get things tuned and reprogrammed. Again, I'm back with these plugs, which are such a pain for me, but I found getting them from the front and then getting them out of the back is much easier. I want to retain all of these plugs and wires. That way I'll be able to use things like the windshield motor, hopefully the stereo system from the doors. I'd like to be able to integrate that into the 1970. A big reason why I wanted to get this car again is because it has the Beats by Dre sound system, the satellite navigation, heated and air controlled conditioned seats, big exciting things for me. So here it is with the doors off. It does run and drive. Here I'm testing it and making sure. So this again was a huge win for me. This was probably my biggest concern. Pro tip, wear gloves. I cut my finger nasty on these doors, and I've done it a couple of times now. My hands have been super beat up from this project. Wearing gloves, especially when you're doing this much metal work and disassembling, is going to be a big lifesaver. Now we're just taking off some of the fit and finish stuff, the rest of the door hinges, tucking those little wires back in the doors, that way I don't cut them later on down the road. Unfortunately, this car gets filthy on the inside, as you'll see, but it does still run and drive up and down the driveway. Super excited. As you can see, that is my excited face. Yes, sir. Pulling into the garage. Unfortunately, I had to pull it back out to back it in just for the access. A really tiny garage bay. I believe it's 22 feet long, 13 feet wide. It's only about 7 feet tall, so this is going to be quite a project. Here, the inside of the trunk seemed to have some kind of a sand in it. I was really learning a lot about the previous driver by this ticket. As you'll see here in the village of Liberty, somewhere near Philadelphia, we got this subject going 103 miles an hour in a 70. So whoever had this car definitely liked to drive it, but it's nice to know that it's capable of it. Even though the ticket's back from 2019, I'm hoping it still holds that same type of power. Finally, the part I was really excited for, being able to bust out the Sawzall and actually start getting apart these quarter panels, the fenders, the rear trunk area. Cut so much easier than I thought that it was going to at first, but then once I started getting into the inner layers and the inner quarters, got a lot more complicated. Here I am switching out blades. I must have gone through probably 100 Sawzall blades through this time, because every area, every square foot that I had to cut 3 or 4 times because of the inner fenders and all the inner structure and what have you. So here I am taking it out, being very cautious by the gas cap. Again, I wanted to use Sawzall skills as opposed to mechanical skills, because I really wanted to keep this as a running driving project. I wanted to keep the interior in it mostly, and I wanted to keep everything that is on it the way it is. So here I am taking out the B pillar. Now this was probably the most structural piece of the car. This is where I was starting to get nervous about the structural integrity of the vehicle. Not really having ever disassembled anything like this, I wasn't sure how strong it was going to be. It took me quite a while to get the roof off. I took a big cut right across the roof in front of the rear window because I was going to try to save the rear window for another project, but you guys will see what happens there in a few minutes. Had to go back and forth several times, yanking on it with the truck. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get enough leverage to just get it going easy, so I had to take an axe to the windshield and kind of cut myself a little bar across. I had such a hard time cutting through the A pillars. I went through quite a few Sawzall blades and a diamond blade for my angle grinder trying to get through there, and I was still unsuccessful, so I had to keep going back and forth with the truck to try to get this roof off. Eventually, I was able to get it off, finally, after a lot of effort, and this is what the car looked like. Did make quite a mess in my driveway with all the glass. Hindsight, I wish I would have maybe did it in the garage, which I laid down carpet in, so that way I could at least sweep it and vacuum it, but you live and you learn. So here I am trying to take out the rear windshield. What a pain this was. This was probably the most physically laborious part of it. I bought this tool from Harbor Freight thinking that it was going to make it a lot easier, but unfortunately it just was not big enough. Hindsight, what I should have done was I should have got the tool that has the cable and the two handles where you kind of saw it back and forth, and trying to pull up on the windshield again unsuccessfully. Eventually I get to the point where I take a crowbar on this last piece and I'm hitting, and snap. After a few minutes of crying, I was back to work, and unfortunately lost a lot of footage just because my phone died. When I took out the rear structure, I was very careful to make sure that I retained enough metal on the rear strut housings, that way I could put a brace across the back and make sure I retained as much structural integrity as possible. This is what the car looked like, almost like a go-kart. Super funny. Had a ton of fun driving up and down the road like this. It was super funny to look at, and the looks that people gave me, including my neighbors, were super odd, but it was super enjoyable. So stay tuned to watch me cut up and make worthless a very beautiful 1970 Dodge Charger.